Today's Prismatic Hunter build might be the best Prismatic Hunter build in the game. This build will allow you to build your super back at a ridiculous rate, will give you constant access to powerful damage resistances, and will let you have potentially the strongest ad clear setup a hunter could ask for. Today I will be showcasing what is, in my opinion, the strongest ad clear build in the game for Prismatic Hunters, and in the end, we will be comparing it to the most popular Prismatic Hunter build and ranking it into a tier list to decide if this build is worth using. So without further ado, welcome to Builds of Fate. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Builds of Fate, the series where I take an exotic class item from the new Dual Destiny mission, make a build around the perks that came with that exotic class item, and then compare it to what is looked at as the best build for the character that we are covering in a particular episode. In the end, we will be ranking the build on a tier list to see how good that build actually is. Today, I'm happy to say that we have a banger to start off the series, as I was fortunate enough to get an exotic class item that featured 2 perks on it that will help to make a build that is perfect for ad clear. We'll touch up on what the exotic class item came with a little later when we discuss what exotics to use with this build, but for now let's dive into what this build is and what my goals for it are. When I created this build, I had 2 things I wanted to achieve with the exotic perks. For starters, I wanted to charge my super back at a ridiculous rate, as the exotic class item I have features a perk that has to do with supers. Secondly, I wanted to make a build that could get access to the new keyword for stasis, and I wanted to make it as easy as possible to upkeep the buff. So how'd I do this? Well, looking into the build, I started by using the Silence and Squall super, and I chose this super for 3 reasons. Number 1 being this super will check off one of the 2 prerequisites that you will need in order to get access to that new stasis keyword, which we'll get to later. The second reason I chose it is because Silence and Squall received a pretty nice buff with the release of the final shape, making this super a stronger option, especially for endgame PvE. The third and final reason for why I chose the super is because it can get a lot of use from one of the exotic perks that I have on my class item, which is Spirit of Galanor, which makes it to where hits and final blows with my super will refund super energy back once the super ends. Doing testing with the super, you can get up to half of your super meter refunded if you get the maximum usage from one single super, which will make recharging your super much easier. Moving on to the class ability, I chose to run Gambler's Dodge so that I can have an easy way to get my melee charge back, as dodging by an enemy will refund your melee charge, which will be helpful for this build. For my melee, I went with Withering Blade, as I felt this would be the best option to use to pair with one of the aspects that we'll be talking about a little later. Furthermore, we can buff the melee with the help of our second exotic perk on our class item, which is Syntheseps, which grants us a 165% melee damage increase when surrounded by 3 or more targets. In order to help us activate this perk fast, we'll be enlisting the help of the grenade of this build, being the Grapple Grenade. I chose this as you can get close to the enemy fast and deal massive damage with the grapple melee, and as you back up, you can keep the Synthos buff for 5 additional seconds after leaving its target radius, meaning we can get value out of Withering Blade easily. Moving into the aspects of the build, I chose Gunpowder Gamble as I felt that for an ad clear build on Prismatic Hunter, this aspect was necessary. This aspect makes it to where defeating targets with abilities, solar weapons, or targets who are debuffed will grant progress towards a solar grenade that unleashes a massive solar ignition when used. This became an amazing choice for this build, as Gunpowder Gamble does a significant amount of damage as well, making it great for a large group of ads and fairly tanky targets. The second aspect for this build will be Stylish Executioner. Now, the reason for why I chose Stylish Executioner was because this aspect will give you easy invisibility on Withering Blade kills, which will allow you to have an easier time with using the Syntheseps perk on the exotic class item. Furthermore, it'll give you an escape route in case you find yourself weak and need an opportunity to heal or even regenerate abilities to keep the build going. Moving on to the fragments of this build, we have 5 fragment slots to use here, so for starters we'll be equipping Facet of Protection. This fragment will grant us 15% bonus damage resistance when surrounded by 3 or more targets, which should be fairly easy to upkeep. The second fragment we'll be using is Facet of Hope, which will allow for our class ability to regenerate faster when we have an elemental buff active, which should be very often thanks to Frost Armor, which we'll have constant access to, but also thanks to Radiant, which we'll have near constant access to. For the third fragment, we'll be running Facet of Blessing, which will start health regeneration on melee final blows. This fragment will be valuable considering how close we'll be to our enemies when using this build. For the fourth fragment, we have Facet of Purpose, which is arguably the most important fragment of this build. This fragment is what will give us access to Frost Armor, as with this fragment, we'll get 2 stacks of Frost Armor for every time we pick up an Orb of Power, to which we'll be generating a lot of Orbs of Power. making the use of this fragment essential. For the fifth and final fragment, we have Facet of Ruin, which will increase the size and damage of the explosion that Gunpowder Gamble does. It will also increase the size and damage of the shatter effect that we can do, but probably won't see happen very often with this build. For the exotics that you'll want to pair with this build, I paired this with the exotic class item that I got from the Dual Destiny mission, which features the perks Spirit of Galanor and Spirit of Syntheseps. However, since most of you probably won't have this combination lying around anywhere, I was able to come up with some great alternatives to use in plays. If you choose to run an exotic class item, then might I suggest Spirit of the Assassin to go invisible on powered melee kills, Spirit of Throat Tracer for access to 4 stacks of Stasis Weapon Surge for 11 seconds upon dealing damage to an elite, mini-boss, champion, or boss-tiered enemy, or Spirit of Caliban to cause ignitions on powered melee kills in column 3, and Spirit of the Liar for a 200% melee damage boost upon landing a powered melee hit, or Spirit of the Wormhusk for health on class ability usage for column 4. If you have no plans on using an exotic class item, then Assassin's Cowl or Foe Tracer will be solid picks. For the exotic weapon, you're not bound to any specific exotic weapon with this build since I couldn't find one that elevated this build to new heights, so I chose to run a Still Hunt to have a great bossing weapon. Speaking of weapons, I wanted to highlight the weapons and mods to use next since this is crucial. For weapons, I'd highly advise you run a weapon that has the weapon trait on it known as Pugilist. In case you're unaware, Pugilist will grant you 10% melee energy when you score a kill with the weapon Pugilist is on. For this build, I chose to run Blood Feud as it is a fairly solid SMG that has access to Pugilist, a damage perk and that of Frenzy, and will also benefit from the mods that we choose to run with this build. If Blood Feud isn't your cup of tea, then I'd suggest New Pacific Epitaph from Ghost of the Deep or Liminal Vigil from Spire of the Watcher. Furthermore, running a heavy weapon that is also stasis will benefit from this build, but more on that later. Hopping into the mods, I chose to run 2 hands-on mods for additional super energy from melee kills, to which you'll be getting lots of them. Furthermore, I also equipped a Harmonic Siphon mod, as this will allow our stasis weapons to generate orbs of power on multi-kills, meaning that when we use our Pugilist weapon to get melee energy back, we can also be generating orbs of power to upkeep Frost Armor's timer and to potentially get additional stacks of Frost Armor in case we haven't reached the max stacks that we can reach. For the gauntlets, I chose to run Firepower for the orb of power that you'll be getting from the grapple melee kills, Heavy-Handed for the orb of power from Withering Blade kills, and Momentum Transfer as dealing damage with a Gunpowder Gamble will count as a grenade damage, meaning you'll be getting a sizable chunk back on Gunpowder Gamble hits. For leg mods, I chose to run 1 copy of Invigoration for 10% melee energy on orb pickup, Absolution for the 5% bonus ability energy to the ability with the least amount of energy regenerated, and Stasis Weapon Search will apply a 10% weapon damage boost to the weapons I am running that has stasis energy, which in this case would be my SMG and heavy weapon. Finally, for the class item, I chose to run Outreach for the 12% bonus melee energy on class ability usage, Reaper to spawn an orb of power on weapon kills after using your class ability, and Power Attraction to collect nearby orbs of power when using your class ability. We will also be benefiting from the use of a few different artifact mods, with the first I want to mention being Creeping Chill, which will release a slowing burst when killing targets who are slowed or frozen with a stasis weapon. Additionally, Radiant Orbs will give you easy access to Radiant when you pick up Orbs of Power, as long as you have a Prismatic build on, which of course you will be having a Prismatic build on when running this build. Finally, we'll be taking advantage of Shield Crush, which will increase your melee damage while you have Frost Armor active, which will be all the time if this build is used right. So diving into the combat flow for this build, I tend to open up with a grapple melee. The reason for this is that you'll get close enough to the enemies that you'll activate Syntheseps exotic perk, which even when you step out of the proc radius, the buff will persist for 5 additional seconds. Furthermore, kills from the grapple melee will generate an orb of power thanks to firepower, meaning that off of 1 ability, you'll be at 2 stacks of Frost Armor, which is roughly 9% additional damage resistance. From there, I like to use my melee to clear out the remaining adds and to generate another orb of power thanks to Heavy-Handed, which will then increase your overall stacks of Frost Armor from 2 to 4, increasing your damage resistance from roughly 9% to roughly 18%. From there, getting to the next set of adds, use your class ability to generate your expended melee charge and to activate Reaper. Then get 1 melee kill to clear out some adds, and then from there, get kills with your stasis weapon to get the orb of power from Reaper, which will increase your Frost Armor stack count from 4 to 5, increasing the damage resistance from roughly 18% to roughly 22.5%. Additionally, if you're getting multi-kills, you'll be getting orbs of power from Stasis Siphon, which should help upkeep Frost Armor's timer. When dealing with a large group of ads or even a boss, popping Silence and Squall should be the move you go for, as it'll do great for crowd control and ad clear and will do some solid damage to bosses. But most importantly, the hits and final blows will refund a large amount of your super after Silence and Squall ends, thanks to Spirit of Galanor allowing you to get 50% of your super energy back. From there, rinse and repeat to upkeep Frost Armor and to build your abilities back faster. Now, while that build might sound appealing, how does it compare to what is considered to be the best Prismatic Hunter build in the game? Well, before we get to the testing, I want to reveal what is considered to be the best Prismatic Hunter build, which is the Prismatic Combination Below Hunter build, which was covered by Mactix. If you aren't aware as to what goes into this build, then I've left a link to that build guide in the description below. For me, I compared these builds on 3 categories, being how good the builds are at ad clear, how good the builds are at DPS, and how easy the builds are to use overall. For ad clear, both builds have their ways of clearing ads easily, but I find the Prismatic Gunpowder build to be better as it has multiple tools for ad clear, and that of Gunpowder Gamble and Withering Blade. For the Prismatic Combination Blow build, it only has Winter Shroud if you're able to slow enemies, as if you're getting melee kills, you'll get your class ability back and using it around enemies will slow them and eventually freeze them, which means that meleeing a frozen target will shatter and kill nearby targets, which is a lot longer and a bit more complicated for ad clear. Therefore, I'm giving the edge to the Gunpowder build, but for boss damage, it's a different story. For this category, I'm giving the edge to the Combination Blow Punch build, as if you pair it with Synthesept or Liar's Handshake, Combination Blow will do massive damage to the boss you're fighting, while the Gunpowder build doesn't do much damage at all. For overall ease of use, while I do believe that the Gunpowder build is easy to use, it can't beat the Combination Blow build. Throughout the entirety of the Combination Blow build, you're using 2 abilities, meaning you're literally pressing 2 buttons, which means it cannot get any easier to use. Overall, while I do find the Gunpowder build to be amazing, I do think that Combination Blow slightly edges it out. So with that being said, where would I rank this build on a tier list amongst other Prismatic Hunter builds that I have tested? Well, the pool for that answer is small, and as you can see from the tier list, I have the Combination Blow build at S tier as I do think it deserves that spot. However, I find that this build has a nice comfy spot in the A tier, as while this build really only has one purpose, and that of having great ad clear, this build exceeds in that category, having multiple powerful tools to not only wipe out ads, but to provide benefits to your weapons to wipe out enemies easily, which is why I have it ranked this highly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that'll wrap up episode 1 of Builds of Fate. If you enjoyed this series and would like to see more, then be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more episodes dropping weekly. If you have some feedback on how I can improve this series, then be sure to hit the comment section down below as I'm open for some criticism on how to improve the series. If you'd like to come catch me live, then you can do so by following the Twitch channel over at twitch.tv/SniperKH_, where I go live a couple times a week, so be sure to drop a follow if you haven't. Finally, be sure to follow my social media platforms, also linked in the description below, to get updates on when I go live, when I upload, and all the other shenanigans I get up to on a regular basis. With that being said, I'm SniperKH, and I'm out. Good luck with gaming.